Hey everybody, I'm Jack Rita with Future Pastimes, and I'm a designer on Dune-themed board games and expansions. And last week I had the pleasure of seeing Dune in IMAX, along with the 10-minute sneak peek of a scene from Dune Part 2. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about what the whole experience was like and what we saw in the video. So this is going to be spoiler. It's kind of a review. And some analysis and commentary and whatever else pops into my head. So this was my first time seeing Dune in IMAX, and I did see it in the theaters the opening weekend when it came out, and that very same day I went home and I watched it again on Max. So I've seen it at least 6 times. This is probably the 7th time I've seen it, but the first time in IMAX, and it is filmed for IMAX. So I really made an effort to pay more attention to what was on the very tops and very bottoms of all of the shots, since I was already very familiar with what was going on in between those areas. And there are a lot of really interesting details. It's mostly ships, extra ships. For example, in the scene very early on, where Chani is talking about the Harkonnens, and you see Raban is marching out and overlooking all of the spice stockpiles and all of their harvesters lined up, and the ornithopters fly by. There's some carryalls, but there's more up in the corners, and I think that was one of the things they did. Was they said to themselves, look, we're filming this in IMAX, all of the important stuff needs to be within the letterbox zone, but we got to throw some bones to the people seeing it in IMAX. So they every time they could stick another ship, that was usually the extra bit of detail that was up there. Now, in the prescient vision that Paul has in the still tent, where Chani points out over the Erg there, and the Fremen are fighting Sardaukar. I hadn't noticed the sandworm probably the first couple of times that I saw it, and I did notice it afterwards, but you get a really good look at it in the IMAX, the one that is coming up out of the ground behind Paul when he's stopping and opens up his face mask there so we can see his blue eyes. And so that sort of thing. It is definitely much better experience, end-to-end, top to bottom, in IMAX. And I already have my tickets to see Part 2 in IMAX. I'm seeing it earlier than the general release, February 25th, which is really nice. It's several days earlier. I'll probably see it again in a regular theater, or maybe in IMAX again. Why not? I mean, that's the best way to see it. So it was great. And before the movie opened, there was a little intro with Zendaya and Timothée Chalamet, where they talked a little bit about, Dune 2, it's epic, and it's this and it's that. And they did a little smash cut of some little scenes, also with a few other people weighing in, like Austin Butler, Florence Pugh, just what it was like working on the movie. And all of that footage was more or less stuff that we've seen from the trailers, a little extra detail. And the ceremony scene where the Baron is giving the rule of Arrakis to Raban, and if all the forces there assembled there were a couple extra angles there. You can see the Baron is floating with his suspensors, and he's got these other things floating with him. Are they life support? Is it Samuda drug? That's not clear. We don't know what that is, but it is floating around with him. And I believe that you can see those same things floating with him on a separate ceremony scene from a different trailer, the one that has Fade in it. Certainly looks like that. We'll find out for sure in a few weeks when we see it. And then there was a little message from Denis Villeneuve, again saying, here we go, stay afterwards. There's a nice 10-minute long scene, and you'll get to see that. So we went through the movie, and it was a good time. And then we got our sneak peek of a Part 2. So it was not the first 10 minutes of the movie, which I think was shown at a different event earlier this year. So this was definitely a specific scene. It was Paul's first worm ride scene solo. And it's a pretty pivotal part of the book. It's been adapted in all of the other media. It's in the Lynch movie. It's the scene where they're all out there and they're Shai Hulud, and then Paul calls a big one, and Stilgar is like, once again, it is the legend. It had a very different vibe in the Villeneuve one. So it starts off with Stilgar is given a thumper to Paul, and we've seen part of that speech already where he says, don't do anything fancy, don't shame my instruction. And Paul is like, I'll do, I won't shame you. So he goes up, and we see Shishakli yells out some encouraging words to Paul, and she gets a little bit of side eye from Chani, who's there, and Shishakli is kind of brushing it off. And it does seem like she's going to have a much bigger role in this movie than the Shishakli character in the book, who is just mentioned. Shishakli will give you some maker hooks, and that's it. One of the new posters for Dune 2 has her right up there on it as one of the new characters. So, and she does show up in the trailer. It looks like she's with a distrans, or what they call a cielago, and as the birds and bats that they have trained to send messages. It looks like she is captured with one of those. So it'll be interesting if she's gonna to what extent of a bigger role she's going to have. Is she essentially replacing Othame or one of the other Fedaykin? It'll be interesting to see what happens with that, and what extra new stuff we might get with this character. But she shouts out to Paul, and Paul climbs up to the top of a dune, and he's pounding the sand to see what kind of good reverberations he's going to get. And we hear Chani sort of talking to herself, go lower. And it's almost like Paul hears her, but certainly there's no telepathy or any mystical thing. He knows that's not the right spot. So he goes further down the dune, and he finds a better thump, almost like drum sand there. And so that's where he plants the thumper. And it starts a thumping, and he climbs up to the top of the dune and gets his maker hooks ready. And it doesn't take long before there's a big boom and a worm is coming. And, they've said, they were shouting, I think it was Shishakli, who's like, call a big one, Muad'Dib. And when they see how big of a worm comes up, Stilgar is like, not that big. And I got a big chuckle from the audience. But the worm comes, and it is visceral. So seeing it in IMAX with that sound, you could feel it, and it is quite epic. In the Lynch movie, it was cool. You're like, oh, this is cool. And in the miniseries even, you're like, all right, even though it's clearly a CGI sandworm, it was still pretty cool. But here, it takes on a life of its own. It is quite impressive, and it comes bursting through the sand. At one point, it's like, where'd it go? And then, boom, it comes out like a giant whale bursting out of the ocean. And then it's coming in, and Paul realizes it's gonna pass him a little bit further away, and he's got to run. So he's running across the top of the dune, and then the dune starts to collapse in. So he's sliding down, and then he finally gets to the worm, and he cracks open one of the scales to expose the sort of moist and tender underbelly. And in the book, that is how you get to ride a worm along the surface, because the worms, they don't like the sand getting into that underbelly, that soft tissue between the scales. So they turn away from the sand, and then they just stay on the top to minimize the irritation. So there wasn't a great sense of turning, but if nothing else, it keeps the sandworm out of the underground. So we get that sense. What was really just remarkable about the whole sand ride is that it feels like you're on top of a train going through a sandstorm. It's just so much wind and so much sand and particles flying at you. It feels very realistic. And so Paul gets the hooks in. He really opens that up, and we get a good look at it, and it's very cool. You get this almost like it's a part of their breathing system. It's I don't know. It was just kind of weird. It looked like it was trying to breathe in and didn't want to breathe in sand. So it was staying up on the surface, and then he's just barreling along, and it feels like, yeah, this is how you travel across great patches of the desert. You're not riding a camel slowly along. You are riding a freight train, and that is what it's like. And so everybody sees Paul. He's on his feet. He's got it. He's clearly got both hooks in, so he can maneuver this thing. And everybody is cheering, and Stilgar has that look of awe on his face. And so it was pretty fantastic segment. I mean, in terms of the book, it's only a couple of paragraphs of action, but in the movie, it's major action. And yeah, you really get a sense of the power and the strength of the sandworms, and by that extension, just how dangerous they are. And so I am really looking forward to seeing these sandworms in action, especially in the Battle of Arrakeen. I think it's going to be epic. It's going to be the definitive Dune for everybody. Even those of us who still love the Lynch movie, this is going to blow that away. And that's just the sense that you get. The scale, the budget is on the screen, and you really are just in the moment with them. So it's fantastic. I could have sat through it again multiple times. I wish I could have gone home and watched it, but I have to wait 3-4 weeks, a little less than 4 weeks. So until we get to see it all together on the big screen. Some of us earlier than others, and I hope you don't hold that against me. But that was the only date where I could get tickets. I actually looked for earlier, or rather later, closer to the actual date. I had to look at a couple of different IMAXs, but the one where I could have gotten them on the 29th, because I thought that would be funny, seeing it on Leap Day. The only tickets available were there was one in the very front row and one in the very back row. In the front row for IMAX, you might as well just throw yourself off a cliff. There's no, it's unwatchable that close to the screen. So I've got really good seats for the 25th. So I'm looking forward to that. And when I see it, I will do a review. I will probably do a spoiler-free review, and then on the 1st of March, I will do a spoiler-filled review, so that most of the people who are probably watching this on this channel are seeing it early anyway. But if you're not, then you'll have your choice. You can see one where you're like, oh, don't give anything away. I haven't read the book, and read the book. But for the rest of us, we can really get into it and talk about what was good, what was faithful, what was new, and what we thought of that as well. So there you have it. Thanks for watching. That's it for this one. We'll see you again soon.